be as kind to your partner as you would to be to one of your good friends. When I see relationships that aren't working, where people are chipping at each other or undermining each other or whatever, there's a lack of kindness. And I think sometimes that can get you through the times when there's strain or when the sort of surges of love and passion aren't feeling quite so intense.
Well, there you are, and here we are. I'm Brahe-Daddo. This is my wife,
Daddo.
and you've joined us for separate bathrooms.
Super excited again for this fantastic couple that we know a little bit about, but we've been able to dive in the next half an hour or so and learn a lot more about who they are.
Richard Glover and Debra Oswald. Richard Glover, for Sydney residents, you will know he's on the ABC in the afternoons for Drive. And Debra Oswald is a writer. You'd know Offspring, the television series. She was the creator of that and a plethora of stage plays. And she's written a new book, right, honey?
Yeah, it's called The Family Doctor. It's been described as a riveting, provocative novel about women's fury, traumatic grief, new love, deep friendship, and the preciousness of life. Richard's also has his last book was called Love Clancy, which is just gorgeous. It's a collection of the letters sent home by his dog Clancy to his parents in the bush. Richard's previous book also includes an incredible autobiography, really, called Flesh Wounds, which has sort of been described as a breathtaking accomplishment in style and empathy.
We can't wait to talk to them. They're outside. They're outside the bathroom while we spray some air freshener.
Knocking on the door.
Let's bring them in. Debra Oswald and Richard Glover.
Thank you two so much for coming in. You're just at your home in Sydney, is that right?
Yeah. In my little office.
Yeah, fantastic, awesome. Yeah, clearly, there's a book reader in there.
Yes,
And they're just all her unsold books.
Right.
yeah.
Any unfinished pieces in there?
Well, they're sort of inside the computer that I'm talking to you on.
Right.
Yeah.
They're still in there.
All the gems in there.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
We'll just dive right in.
Okay.
Sure.
There's a lot of joy in the room. You guys have been together over 40 years now. How did you meet?
Well, I was in my third year at university and Richard had been swanning around the world and came back to university. And this is at the ANU in Canberra. And we had mutual friends. And I was living with someone else and he had various other girlfriends. So
Multiple girlfriends? Wow, Richard.
Yeah. And I was doing, well, you do your thing about me doing the production of the play.
Oh, yes. Well, I was walking around the AMU and I saw that there was a production of one of my favourite plays on, which was What the Butler Saw by Joe Autumn. And I popped my head in the door of the Little Arts Theatre there.
And I was the producer. I was the producer of the play.
And I offered to paint her sets.
He offered to paint my sets.
And that's not a euphemism.
I was going to say, that's quite the metaphor.
So we were brought together by a British sex farce.
So we were friends for a while before we, became a couple. And in fact, to begin with, I was more keen on him than he was on me. But eventually he came to his senses and which culminated in a very romantic moment in the Ansett Pioneer bus terminal in Oxford Street in Sydney, where we ran towards each other and fell back against the black vinyl couches.
Oh.
And because we're not married, we count that as our anniversary. And at the 10-year anniversary, we did a reenactment in Oxford Street.
Fantastic.
A reenactment of that moment.
Since demolished the building.
Yes. Not due to you guys, clearly, though.
There'll be no further reenactments.
Yeah.
Do you have a black leather couch at home? You can always reenact any moment at home.
What? That's what a suggestion. I'm loving that. We might have to put that on the shopping list.
Richard, there's a beautiful quote from you that I read. It says, Debra was standing in front of the fireplace, her head haloed in the candlelight, and I thought, my God, that is it. That is so beautiful. Can you
I do remember that moment. It was in our friend Andrea's little flat in Canberra and we'd been invited. And I knew Debra really well by then, obviously. But there was just this moment where, it was a student digs with, how people used to put candles everywhere and she was standing in front of the fireplace with the mantelpiece alight with candles, haloed in light. And I thought she looked glorious.
Mm. And you've mentioned how the two of you are quite Richard. You've sort of said that the two of you are spookily similar. How similar are you two?
Yeah, well, there's that whole thing about how opposites attract, and I've never quite thought that was true. I think it's really interesting. Most of the people I know where the couples work, there are great similarities. With us, it's kind of spooky in a way. When we formed our household together, we had all the same books. We all had the plays of David Williamson, and we had copies of Theatre Australia magazine. And we'd both been members of this sort of bizarre early version of the Democrats called the Australia Party when we were kind of 12. This organisation had no members at all.
Yeah, that is spooky. That's definitely
It was ridiculous.
And we were both the children of sort of working class English migrants made good. I think there's all kinds of attitudes to life and money and effort that are in sync because of that, I think.
And that's been the glue that's really bound you. I mean, obviously loving each other, but that's been a huge part of the glue that's bound you together for this long.
Yeah, look, I think the 3 separate copies of Billy Joel's Piano Man was probably too much.
Too much. Yeah.
You can only listen to that song so many times too, in a row. You're not married.
No.
You're not married.
I'm still hoping. I'm still, waiting, observing, seeing if he's the right one.
There you go.
So
Look, when we first got together,
yeah,
I think we thought we were part of this vanguard of people who wouldn't marry. And it's interesting that several friends of our age group are not married, but anyone younger than us is married. So we were part of this kind of what we thought was the beginning of a surging movement. We were wrong.
Yeah, right.
Come on, everybody, follow us. Look, where did you go?
So both of us came from divorced parents.
Right.
We both come from godless families. So there was no pressure from anybody to get married. And I think we thought, eventually we will. And then we just never got around to it. I don't particularly like being the centre of attention in that bride way. So that didn't ever hold any appeal to me. And then we never got round to it. And now I feel like if we were to get married, it feels jinxy. It feels we'd just be inviting trouble.
There's a few couples that I know, good friends of ours, who actually feel exactly the same way, that they feel that they're stronger together because they haven't gotten married. They feel like they try harder in the relationship and they work harder because they don't have any legal binding document. So I don't
think that's true though, because you end up, we have binding documents called like a Sydney mortgage. I mean, these are
and the birth certificates and the birth certificates of our children.
That'll do it.
It seems to me that buying a flat together, which we did when I was 23, so very early on, we made that huge commitment.
Yeah,
and we had our first child. Well, we tried from when I was 26, and when I was 28, we had a baby. So that's meaningful. And interestingly, both of our adult children are in long-term relationships, like in one case of 11 years, and neither of them is married.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, as they say, it does go down the leash, these sort of trainings and things. Do you find, I know in our marriage we've often talked about, you make that choice every day to stay together. Yes, there's a marriage document for us, but it's still every day you wake up and go, yep, I'm in this marriage or I'm in this partnership. Do you have that vibe with you two? Is there that consciousness there?
I wouldn't express it quite that way. I don't think, because I think that sort of suggests that there's an alternative. Her name is Veronica and she's beautiful.
Ours is Karen. And she's very inefficient.
This may sound nauseating, but I don't think, there have been times I've been annoyed with him or angry with him, but I don't think I've ever sort of doubted or felt there was an alternative life. Or
she doesn't know how the online banking works.
Yeah, I can't.
She's leashed to me. So seriously, I had to go to Wagga the other day. I went on a really small plane, and so Deborah said, "What's this plane?" And I said, "It's propeller." "How many propellers?" 2. And she sort of sat with that thought for a moment, and then she said, the next thought was, exactly how do you pay the electricity bill using online banking? And so I showed her, and then she said, "Not," and she wrote notes. And I showed her how the password worked and where you fill in thing. And she said, fine. So her main response to the idea that I might the next day die a fiery death was just to make sure she could pay Electricity Australia.
Look, I mean, but in a way, to answer your question properly, Cam, I do think that you make a decision to be kind to each other. That I don't think it's a conscious thing, but there's sort of habits. We've been together since we were so young.
Yeah.
It's hard for us to be conscious about how our relationships works. But sometimes I'm very aware of that sense of be as kind to your partner as you would to be to one of your good friends. Quite often when I see relationships that aren't working, where people are chipping at each other or undermining each other or whatever, there's a lack of kindness.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that can get you through the times when there's strain or when the sort of surges of love and passion aren't feeling quite so intense.
I come from a divorced family as well, and I've certainly used things that didn't work for my mum and dad and flipped them and gone, that's exactly, I'm going to do the exact opposite. Have you found the same thing with your parents?
I think you do that, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, which is back to the discussion about marriage. I think still in my ears when I hear the word marriage, and this is not for everybody. I don't mean to speak for other people, but for me, when I hear the word marriage and I hear the word wife and husband, these are quite negative words in my mind, actually, because of, coming from a, very sort of angry divorce, really.
Yeah.
In which my parents, until their dying day, even though they split up when I was 14 or something, even till their dying days, they were both, every single discussion with them would involve them telling me how terrible the other person was. Like
horrible.
I never had a discussion with either of them where they didn't mention, your appalling mother or your appalling father.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the marriage thing for me. And I think the other thing I feel very strongly is that just because you didn't have a very good childhood yourself doesn't mean you can't be a good parent. I really strongly believe that you can be. In fact, as you're saying, it might even be an advantage.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for me, my mother's relentless negativity and criticism and my father's tendency to sulk and wage Cold War, both those things are anathema to me. So I guess, as you're saying, Alison, I've kind of learned from that and make sure that that doesn't happen with us.
I believe you have a grandchild.
Yes, he's 6 months old. 6 months old this week.
Yes, I can't wait for grandkids. Tell us about him.
Well, he's glorious. So he's the son of our younger son, but whose girlfriend is slightly older than him. So they decided they would get cracking. And he was born on Christmas Day. And
very good for a tightwad grandfather.
Just one time.
And our son's a high school teacher and musician, and our daughter-in-law is a school counsellor and musician.
Great.
So they have, this baby's going to have the best life, and we will be as involved as we're allowed to be, which so far is quite a lot. Do you know the thing that I wasn't expecting about it? I was expecting I would love having a grandbaby, but the thing that kind of slightly surprised me was the incredible joy of watching your child be a parent.
And seeing him sort of take to the task and I wanted to say grow into the task, but he grew into the task on day one.
They're really good at it and thoughtful about it and they're just loving it. Like they've had a lucky run in all sorts of ways, obviously, but they're really enjoying it. And it's so moving. Like sometimes that sort of overcomes me and I have to leave the room.
Well, that's largely due to the both of you because of how you raised him, clearly, that, you've parented him so beautifully.
He's a very particular guy. He came out that way. He's a very sort of self-contained, not self-contained, that makes him sound separate, but he's a very sort of centered person. He's not, I sometimes think he is who Richard would be if he'd had better parents.
Right. Yeah.
Well, because there's damage in my lovely husband that comes from his terrible childhood, and our younger son is like him but didn't have the terrible childhood.
You mentioned that they were both musicians. Did they put play music to the baby before he was born and
listen,
do things like
yes.
that? Yeah.
But listen to this. His bedtime routine
Yep.
is he gets a little massage during which Shelley, his mother, sings to him while Joe plays banjo. And and so he gets a little concert.
Don't tell them about the banjo. They'll ring box.
It's like Mumford & Sons, harmonicas, banjos.
Basically. And so you think, who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want that as their bedtime routine?
Absolutely.
I'd
like to book in, please.
Exactly.
Oh,
so,
that's gorgeous.
So no wonder that baby's happy.
Can you tell us more about The Family Doctor and why you wanted to write a book with this kind of content in it?
Well, it's interesting because I think for people who know me from things like Offspring, it might seem like a departure. But actually a lot of my plays have sort of pain in them too.
Yeah.
This book grew out of my rage about the violence against women and children. You know, we're reading in the paper and you see yet another family murdered by a strange partner. And I didn't know how I could write about that without it being too awful to bear or too worthy. And then I thought about my sister who's a GP looking after little children and families, and I came up with this idea of what if a doctor was pushed by trauma to use her medical skills to, shall we say, solve the problem of protecting. So this doctor is feeling this incredible urge to protect women and children from potential violence. So it's a kind of thriller, not in a kind of puzzle way, but it's a thriller in terms of there's a lot of danger and suspense, and you hopefully are drawn to keep reading to find out what's going to happen to this woman, and is she going to get away with it, and will she get caught, and will she do it again? And so it's really about it's sort of an angry book, but it's got the satisfaction of these women do something about it.
Yep.
Not that I'm advocating murder, I hasten to add.
Yeah.
I mean, as we've established earlier, I love men. I've chosen to live with one for 40 years. I've given birth to two of them.
Yes.
So, I love men, but I don't love the violence against women and children.
I mean, Debra can't say this, but it's an incredibly compelling book. It's one of those books where once you start reading it, you just can't put it down. It's got this great kind of almost moral puzzle at the heart of it. It's very compelling.
Was it cathartic at the end for you at all to be able to put some of that rage into the book?
I think so. I mean, it was kind of a distressing book to write because you had to do lots of research that was not delightful. But, it was exhausting because I tend to kind of method write in the sense that I wind myself up into the mindset of a character. So I'll kind of get angry or upset and march up and down the hall and then come back to the computer and type like a crazy person.
Yeah.
So, there were moments in writing this book that took a lot out of me, but I'm really glad I've written it. That I feel there's a satisfaction in getting that story out.
Did the story come first, or what was that process? What came?
I think for me there was an image where I thought about a doctor looking after – I had sort of physical image of a doctor in surgery looking after little kids, vaccinating them, treating their ear infections, and then a man coming in that she knows is likely to murder his wife and child, and her having this patient on the examination table in her surgery and thinking, I could do it. I could just inject something in this man now and I would get away with it. I think it was that moment. And then around that I constructed – it's also a story about female friendship because the woman has a very good friend who's a court reporter and you go through the story with both of them. So it's almost like – those magic crystal garden things where you put the piece of cardboard in and you make the crystal mixture and it grows crystals?
Oh, yeah.
I sometimes feel that writing is like that the little cardboard tree was that image of the woman killing the man. And then I mixed up all my crystal solutions and then the story grows until it looks like the real world.
Yeah.
That would be amazing opening titles, wouldn't it? To have those images if you were to make a movie.
Yes,
of it.
Good idea.
Yeah.
I'm writing that down in my notebook as we speak.
Yeah.
It's yours. You can have that one. Can I just ask this question about flesh wounds and post-flesh wounds, putting it out there? Did you have that sort of, I would call it buyer's remorse or seller's remorse, so you put something out there that is so personal? Did you have any of that?
No, I don't think I have any of the proper boundaries that people
Yeah, right. What does that mean?
I suppose there was a moment when I was writing it where, because there's some quite brutal stuff about, suffering from paedophilia and things like that in it.
And we had to warn the kids about that.
Yeah. And I also think every time you sort of say something that's difficult about yourself, you do earn the right to say things that are difficult about other people. So there's some very difficult things about my parents in there, I think it would be not right to write about them without writing with just as much frankness about yourself.
Yep.
And we told some of those stories to our friends and as dinner party pieces almost for a long time.
Yeah.
And it was only when Richard's mother was dying, was demented and about to die, that Richard felt he could ever tell the story because he didn't want to hurt anybody.
Yeah.
So I think you'd already processed a lot of that stuff before you wrote the book. Don't you think?
Yeah.
Does that still play a part within your relationship, the challenges of your childhood? Does that sort of ever undermine the relationship in any way?
Yeah. I think one of the sort of weird things about pedophiles is, and I think this is probably true of all of them, is that the way they operate is they destroy your self-confidence so that you've got no protection against them. You've got no weapons left to protect yourself. So they kind of basically run you down. That's the way they operate. And I think that has left me incredibly overly sensitive to criticism. So when I hear criticism. And so, I think the worst part of me being a partner to Deborah is she'll make some completely reasonable observation. Could you not put the fry pan in that top cupboard because I can't reach it? Which I will hear as, you're no good as a husband or even as a human being.
So then I can be reasonable for a while, and then I arc up as if I'm being told that I'm a terrible, maybe because I've got a mother who was very negative and criticising people all the time, that me being characterised as a very negative, critical person, I think that's not fair, that's not what I was saying. I think one method that we've developed is that when Richard's in that mood for whatever reason, usually because of outside pressure, just let it sit. Don't feel you need to have it all out at the time. I know that maybe goes against something. And then quite often, like sometimes on a Friday, he's really tired at the end of a week of the radio. And so some minor thing he'll respond with. It's not even responding inappropriately, wrongly. It's about responding with a kind of emotional fuel that's too great for the moment.
Yes, yeah.
And so sometimes I just say, this is Friday talking. This is Friday evening talking. Make no assessments of the world or your life at this time. And sometimes there's a question of letting him be cranky with me, and then in the morning, on Saturday morning.
Well, not cranky with you, I'm hurt. Wounded, because what I've heard is you saying that I'm a terrible person, even though she hasn't said that at all.
And so I just say, that's not what I said. I just try to, sometimes you have to
want the fry pan put in the lower cupboard.
Sometimes you just have to say all the positive things that don't seem to be going into the person's head, but they sit on the external part of the brain and they will seep in.
Yep.
Once the cortisol levels, once the stress hormones have reduced, the things you've said will be recalled and will enter the working parts of the brain.
Yes.
And then in the morning, I mean, this is a rare thing. I'm not talking about something that happens every Friday. Yeah. Then sometimes on a Saturday morning, Richard will say, I'm sorry, I was unreasonable last night. And then it's over.
Yeah.
Because I think if you understand where something's coming from in another person, then you don't take it personally. I say that like that's easy to do. It's really hard to do. Yeah. And I'm still learning how to do that in the world with people.
I think a lot of people can and will relate to what you just said.
Absolutely.
Richard, I'm exactly the same. As that, and to use your analogy of the fry pan, it's like it's just a fry pan. We're talking about a fry pan and putting it in a cupboard. We're not talking about how you are as a man.
No, I think in your case, the fry pan decision does reflect on wider issues.
See, now I'm hurt.
Exactly. I'm glad you see through it all, Richard. This is true.
Evil man.
I think we both suffer actually from that same thing where I get really oversensitive by any comment, you get really oversensitive by any comment. I think, we haven't had traumatic childhoods. There's something innate that, that, I mean, I grew up very insecure in myself anyway, but I think we both suffer from that, and it catches us out as well.
Yeah,
I love where the kindness comes in. Deborah.
Absolutely.
Well, you were talking about it, Deborah.
I think the other dynamic for us, which I think is probably, I suspect is true for a lot of people, is when one person, and usually it's me, is dealing with blows from the outside world. I mean, I've been a writer for 40 years, so there has been a number of such blows.
Yeah.
And I'm upset about it, probably too much for the moment. And the partner who's supportive and loving and thinks you're brilliant gets more upset on your behalf than you are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or tries to solve the problem, tries to say what you need to do is this and this, or don't feel sad because you've got these other successes. So either trying to solve the problem in a moment when you just want to feel like rubbish for a minute, or telling you that what you're feeling is unreasonable because of all these other good things in your life, which may be true once you pan back a bit. But in that moment, you just want somebody to say, that's terrible, no wonder you feel terrible.
Yes.
And I think that is it tends to be a man thing. The man wants to solve the problem for you, and that's really not a useful response, because they just want to sit with the pain of it for a moment and have you acknowledge the pain of it for a moment. But the urge is, I'll solve it in some way. That television executive, I'll go and punch him in the nose. I mean, figuratively.
Yeah.
Or why don't you send it to this person instead? They'll be more like, in fact, I'll put it in the post bag for you. Or as Deborah says, you should focus on these other ways you could do it. Well, that's not what they want from you. What they want from you is just to be supportive of the pain they're feeling.
Yeah.
I was going to say, you know where the fry pan is. You can always grab that and go and hit the television executive with the fry pan.
Now that it's been moved to a lower cupboard.
I think we're really coming up with a plan. We've got the opening credit sequence, the crystal tip. We've got the opening exciting incident, which is a man grabbing a fry pan from the high cupboard. Where the woman can't reach it because he's so short.
Yeah.
We are on the same page. We do a segment called the 2-minute shower where we conserve water by keeping our answers concise.
Okay.
So, first question, what do people get wrong about you?
I don't know.
Oh,
God, that's very difficult to keep short. I think they probably think I'm more confident than I am.
I think I would say the same. People probably think I have this smooth, marvellous career when there's huge holes and misery.
You're the swan. You're the swan looking effortless on the top of the water and feeding like a champion underneath.
What's your best quality?
I think I'm a good listener. I think I listen to people and listen to what they're actually saying rather than waiting for cues to say what I want to say.
I think I'm crazy brave about showing my heart.
True.
Wow. What's your partner's best quality?
Deborah's ability to listen. I think she's deeply kind and deeply wise.
God, how am I going to match that?
Come on, Ryder, you can do it.
I think he's brilliant and has this great mind for coming across all different kinds of topics, which is why he's so good at the radio. I think he's a hugely loving person. I think he's very funny. I think he's an extraordinary father, and his devotion to me is, I'm very lucky, but it comes from qualities in him. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It comes from his sort of strength and loyalty and ability to love, and I'm the beneficiary of that.
Yeah, beautiful. Describe your perfect day.
Oh, well, I just would be reading and then making dinner.
With our children?
Yeah.
It would be reading, a lot of reading, walking with our dog, and then cooking a huge meal and our children all being under the one roof for dinner.
With grandchild?
Yeah,
of course.
You both mentioned reading. What are you reading at the moment?
I get a bit obsessive about reading, so I read this piece about another obscure to me writer called Nell Zink, who's an American but lives in Berlin, and it's very and I've now read 4 in a row, and they've got no sense of restraint or caution at all.
Richard does stunt reading, like men. He'll just get on a jag and read all of somebody.
Yeah.
Wow.
I see it as stunt reading.
Right.
So I have just finished during lockdown Proust.
Yeah, so that's stunt reading.
That's stunt reading. It's all 6 volumes.
Gosh.
I know.
You are prolific.
That's hours. I mean, that's hours, isn't it?
I know.
Oh, yeah.
He's such fun to live with. I just finished Emily Maguire's novel Love Objects, which is really wonderful, new Australian book, really great. Love Objects. And I've just started Kazuo Ishiguro's new book, Clara and the Sun. So I'm having a good run.
Yeah, fantastic. What's your biggest pet peeve?
Oh, in life. I thought you were going to say about each other. Or
In life. It can be about each other, but I like in life.
I think people being opinionated with no information. You know, I read the Sydney Morning Herald letters page, and it's just all these people who actually haven't bothered to advise themselves of the facts of the matter, making assumptions about it and arguing with enormous compassion. I think there's just too much opinion in the world and not enough people saying, well, there's, in that particular issue, there's some arguments on either side, for instance.
And I think I would just add to that by saying too much opinion instead of saying, oh, so what is it like to be you?
Yes.
More curiosity.
Yeah.
Yes.
The why.
Yeah, more curiosity, less opinion.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, guys, final question. Your partner in one word.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, just one.
It's hard for writers.
Magnificent.
Oh.
Because it's got to be something that covers so many different things.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Oh, there you go.
Dazzling.
Oh. Oh.
I knew you guys would come through with that something
You
beautiful.
two are fabulous.
Well done.
Oh, so good.
Debra Oswald, Richard Glover, thank you so much for spending time with us in the bathroom
Thank you. That was
today.
fun.
It was really good fun.
Yeah, it was
More so for us, maybe. It was
Absolutely.
so great. And our listener, too. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
I knew they'd come through at the end. Magnificent and dazzling.
Oh, I mean, yeah, you're talking about two highly creative, intellectual writers that, their language was going to be fantastic, right? So how wonderful. That's just left me feeling pretty warm and fuzzy.
Feeling okay about the world. Hearing them. Because after what they've been through, what they've been able to turn around.
Yeah, exactly.
I loved Deborah's line about relationship, to make a decision to be kind.
Yeah. And I don't think it's that hard. I really don't, to make that decision, in any moment. I know sometimes our emotions get the better of us, or our history or pain or whatever that is, though, it just, when someone can flip the narrative, particularly like Richard's done with his life, and become an incredible father, grandfather, human, husband, it gives us faith that everyone can have a crack at doing the same thing.
Thank you for being with us today.
Yeah.
On this wonderful conversation. It was so inspiring. Debra Oswald and Richard Glover from the ABC in the afternoons.
That's right. And just before we go, we have got a money expert coming in. One of the things that we hear a lot about that causes some discomfort in marriage is money. And we have got an upcoming episode for you guys.
Yeah. So what we're doing is we've got questions and thoughts about it. We want to know if you have questions. We can ask your questions on your behalf.
We've got an expert coming in, and she's going to tell us all about what we need to know about money, relationships, how to work with it. We're super excited. So if you do have any questions, you can jump on the Facebook. You can send us a message via Instagram.
You're at Daddo.
Yes, I am.
I'm at Cameron Daddo. And you can also use the Facebook page, Separate Bathrooms, as well as the email address in our show notes.
Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.